Welcome
Hi,
to the webinar, and my colleague and friend, and I've known his family for 40 years, long time, Andrew Altfest. So,
you're not
Andrew,
that old, Marty.
I'm way beyond. Tell everyone who you are and tell everyone about FPL for what it is so they know. And we're going to have what hopefully will be a very productive and interesting discussion about financial planning, estate planning, the interplay of attorneys and financial advisors. Tell everyone how smart you are.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Andrew Altfest. I am a financial advisor, and I have grown a RIA firm to $2 billion of assets under management. And then I started some years ago. I started a software company out of a pain point that I had as a financial advisor and leader of a large RIA firm that um, automates and saves a lot of time within the estate tax and insurance planning process. And that's available to all advisors to use. It's called FP Alpha.
Which I've tinkered with. And Andrew, when he remembers me, sends me or involves me in tinkering with stuff, and it's really fascinating. And what's amazing about FP Alpha and a lot of these other AI programs is it's only getting more and more powerful. It's already revolutionizing what we do, and it's a fascinating opportunity. I'm absolutely intrigued by how it's um, transforming my estate planning practice as an estate planning attorney now. But Andrew, I just wanted to, before we formally start, I was going to put on a collared shirt and a sport coat, but my new fashion designer, John Fetterman, recommended I wear a hoodie. So I thought that would be. I've never done this before. We'll see what the reaction is.
Well, if you're so bold, you can put the hood up at some point in the conversation.
Well, if you embarrass me, I'll have to. So anyhow, ignore my dress. I am really a lawyer, even though I don't have my three-piece gray suit on. So, Andrew, one of the things we were talking about when we were kind of chatting before we started this is my impression is that a lot of advisors, and I'm speaking really more from the attorneys who I have these discussions with, maybe some financial advisors are more tech savvy, don't understand the distinction, the nuance, the benefit of what a program like FP Alpha, there's others like Estate View, maybe Vanilla, I haven't worked enough with it to really say, provide through their AI interface that you can't get with just, let's say, getting a subscription to Copilot, which we have and we use. And I'll mention a few interesting things we do. Um, One of the things that I've learned, and you should elaborate on it because I think it's really important for people to understand the power behind buying a subscription and not merely just AI, is what they call training the AI. So, as I've been tinkering with my own subscription, I give Copilot parameters, guardrails, uh, um, guidance that I tell it to memorize and remember for future work. So that over the time that I've been doing this, Copilot already has a pretty substantial number of instructions, if that's the right word, from me on how I want it to work. So maybe just talk to that because I don't know that a lot of people understand why there's such a huge value in getting something where you have a team of people constantly not just having trained the AI, but constantly training it as you learn more.
Yeah. So I think it's good to start with why do this in the first place? What's missing today? And then we can talk about the tech. I think what's missing is a few things. The All financial advisors are trying to do more for clients, and their clients want them to do more. The investment business is getting more competitive, so there's a need to differentiate. And the estate planning is one of the those areas that's most desired by clients that have help. And there's reasons for that, right? I mean, you can't, every time that one of your clients, Marty, goes to you, they're probably thinking, well, what's Marty going to charge me? Or when do I even need to go to Marty? I don't know when I need to go to Marty. If someone dies, sure, then I could figure out. If I got divorced, I'll probably go to Marty. But, if my assets grow in value, how do I know if I should go to Marty? Or if I sell a business, how do I? So the advisor the clients need help. The advisor is meeting with the clients all the time and can provide that help. The problem has been, how do they provide it? It's a really time consuming process to go and dig into someone's legal documents, their estate plan, and then figure out what's going on and what needs to be improved. And some advisors have strong competency in this, but many don't as well. So you have people at all different experience levels. So how do you address the issue? Well, you can hit the easy button on the whole thing by using an AI platform that reads the documents, helps you explain to the client what's going on in their documents, and almost no clients have ever seen a flow chart of their assets. So it's the documents are written in a way of that's good for an attorney and good for legal compliance, but client there's people, not everyone comes along for the ride because they don't understand what's going on. So the client's kind of left behind in terms of understanding what's going on in their estate plan. So you can get a flow chart, automated flow chart delivery from the legal documents using AI, and then insights about what's going on and what can be potentially improved. And if the advisor is so inclined, then they can also run alternative scenarios. The assets that are set to transfer through probate, like in New York, that's not a good thing where we are, Marty. There's long delays and costs, and so what can be done as an alternative, or they're subject to state estate tax. What can be done as an alternative? So that's the workflow and the opportunity. Why do this? Because advisors are looking to do it. Also, really good things happen. You connect with the next gen naturally through this process. Clients, they're getting older. Many clients are getting older, and if they pass, the advisor is out of the picture. We know that. Everyone knows that. So you connect with the next gen using estate planning, and then you also put in front of a potential client something that is much more valuable than just tackling one issue in their lives, like investments. You say, I can help you with multiple things. And when's the last time your financial advisor reviewed your estate documents? And you'll hear never. In almost every case, we have customers of FP Alpha who routinely ask that question and land new business. We have people who've landed $100 million clients using our platform. So these are the opportunities. Why do it? What are you trying to solve? The advisor wants to be part of the process, doesn't have the time, sometimes doesn't have the experience. And then you hit the easy button by using an AI-driven software platform. Now, the software, it's not easy reading legal documents. AI is here, but reading legal documents, you can't use an LLM off the shelf like an open AI to do this. If you could, it would be a nice
Why don't you define LLM? Because
a large
that's not
language.
you don't mean a master's in taxation, do you?
Like that would help you read a legal document, but an LLM is LLM is a large language model, and a large language model like an open AI cannot accurately read a legal document, and therefore you have 100 attorneys write 100 different. The way you write your legal document, Marty, is not the same as the guy down the street, right, or the guy across the country. So how do you interpret? How do you have that read accurately? And unfortunately, an LLM is not at the point in which it can accurately read a legal document. So it will give you something, and but the issue is, will it give you something that's accurate? And the answer is no. It will not give you something that's accurate today. So what way that we've solved this problem is unique. We have for years trained our AI models, having attorneys actually review legal documents, and based on how they perform this workflow, flow charting assets, understand what's being said by document type, then we've trained our AI, and we use natural language processing as the core way that we review legal documents, and it's the only way that you can do it accurately. And so people don't want to use a tool that's not an advisor. The worst thing that happened to an advisor is that they present something to a client that's not accurate, because then they lose trust. Then the client says, this is not right. And the relationship, rather than being enhanced, is actually hurt. And sometimes AI is not legal documents. vary by how accurate something is. So you have to know when something's not accurate, and then at that point, you should have an attorney review it. We do that too. So we have legal documents that AI is reading accurately. And that's why we're very proud that our satisfaction is the highest in estate planning, according to Michael Kitces. And so we have the highest estate planning satisfaction, and it's in part because our reading accuracy is good, and people don't have to can rely on it, and they don't have to redo the work that they're trying to offload to AI. And then we have something that is that people value, and that provides valuable insights that allows them to get use cases delivered, executed on, like how do they connect with the next gen, and they're saving a lot of time in the process. So that's how we tackle this. We have both our own AI that we've developed using natural language processing, and then we have what's called a human in the loop in the form of an attorney who's reviewing documents where we don't have the same confidence level. So
Uh,
everyone gets
Let
something
me, let
accurate.
me, Andrew, let me interject a point because I think it's really important for people to understand the power of what you just said. You can't go out and just get a subscription to Copilot, which I have and I use every day. And in other webinars, I've talked about some of that. I don't think we'll talk about too much now, but a little bit. But I can't possibly spend the time training my Copilot with parameters, instructions. Remember to do this every time I put in an insurance trust. But when you have a company that has devoted the time and the personnel, and I'm guessing this has gone on for years already, think of how deep and involved the instructions and parameters are. And if I call up Andrew, maybe even after this webinar, he says, "Oh yeah, we better go and tweak something." They're constantly updating and refining what they have. I don't know that any firm, unless you're really massive, can afford to do it. And even if you're really massive, that's not really your expertise. I'm going to let you finish, but I got a whole list of stuff I want to talk to you about based on your comments. And I have some different views of the advisor's role that I think will make the application or use of software and AI like FP Alpha and others even more important. But I think it's a different perspective that I have as an estate planning attorney on the role that financial advisors can play. And it's not to minimize it, it's to expand it, but in different ways. So when you finish, I'll jump in and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely you said it well. It's an iterative process. It's iterative in the sense that we're constantly improving the types of documents that are being read, or the accuracy. Accuracy again has to be incredibly high for us to get started, or it has to be the AI has to be reading at an extremely high level of accuracy, or the attorney is going to look at the document. And then what are the ways to improve? What's in Marty's? So if I were to speak to you, and I were to put a document in front of Marty, you come up with different insights. So how do we take the insights that Marty and other attorneys have, and then put it into our platform so they come out and say, all right, this document says that the kids inherit get the assets out of distributed from the trust at age 30, but at age 30, maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe these kids, we don't know what they're
Andrew,
doing,
I'll give you a guarantee in writing, which I don't often do, that if the kid gets the money at age 30, by 31, they're either getting sued or divorced.
but yeah, at least check in
Yeah.
check in along the way and see if it's appropriate, right, or if you want to change something. But
Let me jump in and try to talk to you because you said it like I got a whole list of things you talked about that I want to talk to you about. And this is for my interest and my frustrations, maybe even more than the audience. So first of all, um, you mentioned something that's really, really, really important, and I think it's often kind of left off the radar as a lot of financial advisors are diving headfirst into estate planning. And I'm all for it, but with thought. Everything's got to be done with deliberation and thought. Different skill levels. Somebody who's had some seminars and some basic training, maybe academic training in estate planning, that's not a substitute for 30, 40 years of experience or even 20 years of experience. And different firms, and you said it, but I want to emphasize it is really important, have different skill levels on estate planning. So if you're really focused on estate planning and you're knowledgeable about insurance, you can't be an expert in everything. And if you have background in estate planning, even if it's limited, doesn't mean you don't get involved, but you got to get involved on a level that's appropriate to your skill set. And some firms, a lot of firms, especially a lot of bigger firms, they hire estate planning attorneys with decades of experience. They have a different bench than a firm that doesn't have that. But also keep in mind, one of the things that concerns me, some very well known firms have nationally known, really brilliant estate planning attorneys on their team. But are they actually working on the individual client matters? Or are they really more from a marketing figurehead, brain trust type of perspective? Who's really on the account for a particular client? That's the skill level you have to look at. And there's a wide variation. One of the frustrations that I have as an estate planning attorney is that some financial advisors, I don't know if they misread, maybe you have some insight, Andrew, but they feel like they have a level of depth of knowledge of estate planning that they don't have, and they're giving really bad, incorrect information. And I think that's fine. And I'm going to tell you why in a second, because Andrew talked about mistakes, and I think it's fine to make mistakes. But I find they get argumentative when I'm trying to explain to them a better or the more correct way to do it. I'll give you an example. I had a financial advisor refer a client to me, and he had met with them. So he was really like wedded to whatever he told them before they met with me. And he talked about it, and Andrew mentioned it, about probate avoidance. I kind of like want to avoid probate too. I think it's a logical thing. The system is not only awful in terms of time, but it's also all public and everything's online now. So if you can minimize and avoid probate, that's a good thing. But this couple was in their late 30s. How much of a risk is probate? I was far more concerned about asset protection issues, but we had all this probate stuff and revocable trust stuff that was like on his agenda, and I couldn't move the needle to something that was far more important for them. Thoughts, comments? What do we do?
I think this is an interesting topic because the job of the advisor, in my opinion, is to help take the client so far. If you've uncovered issues and you've told the client, like, look, you're subject to probate, and perhaps this is something that's going to add delay and cost, and you have easy ways to plan around this, and go speak to your attorney. I know Marty, or you're working with Marty. He's a really competent guy. I'm going to give you this,
He's got a
and
nice hoodie too.
he's got a nice hoodie. He's been doing this a while, if nothing else. But he's actually a pretty big deal in the estate planning world. Uh, and I'm going to give you a bunch of things that I think you should consider, and you should speak to Marty about it and let Marty do his job. If you've done that, you've gotten the client to recognize issues. They're going to be very happy with you. You're going to have done a good job to improve their well-being, and then let Marty, take over and let him do his thing. Well, you don't need to argue with Marty. You don't need to argue with the estate. You've done your job, and if you want to actually want to build a relationship with Marty,
Any
someone like
estate
Marty,
planner, any
any
estate
estate
planner.
attorney, you want to build a relationship with them. Use this as a way to build a relationship. Let them see that you're helping it, by making their lives easier. Go to Marty. Here's a bunch of information that will help your estate attorney. I'm going to provide the balance sheet. I've done planning. This is what your balance sheet looks like. Here are some things going on in that I've
Let me
noticed.
cut you off because I want to comment on some of what you said. So first, let me say something you didn't say that I think is also important, and it may upset some of my colleagues in the estate planning bar. But listen, we said that there's wide variations in skill sets in the estate planning specialty amongst financial advisors. The same is true amongst estate planning attorneys. There are attorneys that are general practitioners that may be perfectly capable of doing a simple plan, but when they get things that are complex, it's beyond what they do. There's attorneys that do a lot of estate planning, but may do it at a very simple level because that's where they practice. There's attorneys that focus their estate planning on high net worth clients. There's attorneys that focus on Medicaid planning. You as the financial advisor need to also understand, just like I was saying, you got to know your skill set as a financial advisor when you dive into the estate planning pool. But if you're really helping your client, you need to help assess the skill set of the attorney they're working with, because a lot of clients already have an attorney, and you're not going to upset that apple cart. You want to, like as Andrew said, build a bridge and build another COI to get referrals and so on and so forth. But you also, to help protect your client, need to assess, does this particular attorney have the capability of doing what the client needs? The client may have had wills done 15 years ago with a reasonably competent estate planner. Their estate is grown to $50 million. Now they need somebody far more specialized. So you need to do that. Another thing, and Andrew said it, and I just want to emphasize it because it's really important. I said earlier that I feel that sometimes when estate planners have laid out an estate, I'm sorry, financial advisors have laid out an estate plan, they feel kind of wedded to it. They don't want to say, well, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe we should do something different. Oh, that's interesting idea what the estate planning attorney said. I think it's how you present it, how you package it. Don't package it as here's the plan you need to do, right? So let's say you do talk about probate avoidance, perfectly reasonable. If the attorney, like I did in the example that I gave a minute ago, identified that asset protection is far more important for this particular client, go with the flow. But if you say this is your plan, you're now in an awkward position because, like Andrew said, now you lose credibility because you said this. I'm not an estate planner. I'm your financial advisor, but I'm going to help get you started. Now you're the catalyst for the plan, which puts you ahead of the cart, puts you ahead of the estate planning attorney. And you know what? If you're creating the understanding that, yeah, I got to sit down and do planning in the client's mind, you're the hero for the client. The estate planning attorney is going to love you, but you don't have to present it that you're given the be all and end all plan. And that has been a very common problematic thread I've seen with many wealth advisors where I try to have to shift what they've done. Don't present as the ultimate plan or the absolute correct answer. You don't have to. You're getting the ball going. You're giving them ideas. You're giving them a value add just by giving ideas. And if you just take their information, not just documents, and feed it into FP Alpha, you can get out family tree, balance sheet with comments, planning ideas, summaries of the documents. You can sit down for a couple of hours with this client and be an absolute hero. Just don't couch things with finality that this is the answer, because it isn't your specialty unless that's really what you do. So you need to get the expert involved, and you got to assess that the person they're going to, the attorney they're going to, has that expertise. So mistakes are fine if you said, listen, I'm giving you ideas. I'm not giving you the be all end all final plan. Andrew, any thoughts or comments on that?
I think that's right. You gotta harmonize. Attorneys, state attorneys are great, excellent referral sources. If you can get it right, you can differentiate yourself. You can say, I'm going to be checking in with my clients and sending opportunities where there's a need, a client has a need back to you, making it, the attorney, wouldn't you say this is correct, Marty? And you get clients in different ways. You get someone who comes to you who has a shoebox full of financial information, and that you're going to have to sort through it, or you can get someone who is referred to you by a financial advisor with a nice buttoned up financial profile that allows you to like just look at this very easily, and it'll be less headache for you. So be the person
100,
who's in the
100%.
latter.
100%. Let me emphasize that and tell you another horror story of problems that I see really consistently with some of the really large wealth management firms. So, what Andrew just said, you want to get involved in the estate planning process, you should get involved, and the client wants you to get involved. If you already have a balance sheet for a client, you're not going to be investing and doing financial planning without a lot of financial data. Why should the client pay me or my staff or have me bake into my fees putting together data that you already know, even a family tree? So one of the really vital roles you can play to the estate planning process is, hey, client, you're overdue for an estate plan. You're overdue for updating your will, your trust, whatever you got. I, the financial advisor, am going to put together all the materials because you know what to do. And FP Alpha lays it out. Give me the report from FP Alpha with the balance sheet, the family data, and the document summary. And I hit the ground running and save the client thousands of dollars a time. And that's all because of what you did organizing it. That to
Yeah.
me is a huge role. Now I'm going to go back and pick on you for a minute. When you first were describing the process, you did something that I find a lot of wealth advisors do. I'm picking on you. I'm sorry. And that's focus on documents. And I'm not, and I, as an attorney, I mean, documents should be everything, right? That's what I do is I write documents, but it's the planning that's essential. So if you put together all this family information, and that's only really the secondary item, I'm going to tell you the first in a minute, which you will excel at as a wealth advisor. If you put all this together, we can together collaboratively work out a plan, and then we really know what documents to do. I don't think very often when a client comes to me and tells me what documents they need or want, they have any idea what they need or want. Usually it's something different. Um, the other thing, which is the number one most important thing, how often do you meet with a typical client? Annually, quarterly, monthly?
Yeah, well, it depends on the client and what they
You're
want,
not a
but
lawyer. You can't
a
say it
minimum.
depends. That's the lawyer's answer
Well,
to
that's
everything.
the truth, but it's a minimum of once a year, and for many clients, it's more frequent than that, quarterly, and it's I won't say depends. It's based on their goals and what they want.
Right, but you have an ongoing relationship where you're meeting the clients regularly. It's not uncommon for an estate planning attorney to get a client come in, they'll do documents for them. The client doesn't come back for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We get calls every month from somebody, at least once a month, that hasn't been around in 25 or 30 years. And they talk to me as if I remember who they are. Now, thankfully, because of and this is an application of Copilot or AI that I use, we can pretty quickly get up to speed. I can actually say to Copilot, because Copilot, we have all of our data that's been scanned. Everything's been electronic for digital for 15 years in my practice. I can say, hey, Copilot, John Smith is coming in for an update meeting. Can you give me a summary of all the documents? And I just did this recently for a client that had a question about a very complex trust transaction that was done like 5 or 7 years ago. And Copilot, in like what, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, gave me a summary of every document in my entire database, including links in case I wanted to get one, and summarize the specific transaction I asked about. Years ago, it would have taken me hours to dig that out. So we'll figure it out. But you, because of your ongoing relationship as a wealth advisor, it's a different relationship. You know what's going on with the family. Before I meet with that client, let me know, even if it's my client too, even if I referred them to you. Yeah, their daughter got divorced, the son has cancer. Tell me what's going on. You also know the human element of planning because you have an ongoing relationship. I'm just meeting the client. I'm under time pressure because they know the clock is ticking because we're billing hourly, right? But you have the benefit of that knowledge. Share it with the estate planner. The single most important contribution and value add that I think a wealth advisor on almost any client can give any estate planning attorney and hence to the client is to get the lawyer up to speed about the human elements of the plan. Sometimes they're simple, sometimes they're really complicated. And my thought, Andrew, on AI is getting more and more powerful. It's going to take over more and more what we can do. So we either can use it and leverage it, or we're going to be left behind in the dust. The two areas that I think we as advisors will have for a very long time, one is creativity, right? Creatively stepping back and looking at the client situation, and two is the human element of planning. I don't think from religious issues to drug addiction issues to um, uh, personal preference or lifestyle. Those are all things that impact a plan and how you deal with them, especially in a creative way when there's limited resources for all these goals. That's more of an art than a science. I think that's something that's going to remain in our purview for a long time. So I think that's a real value add for the wealth advisors.
100%. Couldn't agree more with you. That's my theme for 2026 is the human side of planning, and I think that the tools, AI driven tools, free up time to allow advisors to spend more time with clients. And the great thing about estate planning is that gets picked up and more advisors engage with estate planning is that it's among the most human relationship driven parts of someone's planning. I mean, when you're talking about estate planning, you're talking about people's relationships with their family members, the the trust that they have with different people and the well-being of different people in their family and how they hate their son-in-law and think that this greedy son of a gun is going to get his hands on the client's daughter's assets. I mean, how to prevent that. These are the types of conversations that are much more personal and bring you closer to the client on the human side. So the advisor is using these tools to save time, be more the general physician of finance, of course, working with an estate attorney and other people on the team, engaging more with clients on the things that matter most to them. And on the estate planning side, that this is why an estate attorney makes the most sense. I mean,
The right estate attorney,
the
because
right
they're going to
estate
be
attorney,
different. And that,
but
by the way, don't be shy to say to the client, I don't want to rock the boat, and I know this has been your attorney, but you've outgrown them, or you have a specialty they don't serve. Are they able to bring somebody in their firm in that has Medicaid planning? Are they able to bring somebody in that has planning for $50 million estates? Do they really work in that space? That's a really important role. But I think one of the big take home messages, and if I'm repeating it, I'm sorry, but I just see it missed too often. A lot of wealth advisors are so focused on getting complex legal documents read. And Andrew rightfully pointed out some of the limitations. Having a big picture understanding, that's great. But that is not the biggest, in my view, value added role. Understanding the client, like Andrew was just talking about, boy, identifying issues like that or facts like that is huge. I can't always figure all that out when I just meet a client and have a couple of hour meeting with them. But you've talked to this client for years. You will know so much more. That's essential. Far more important than whether their insurance trust has the right crummy powers. Yes, that's important, and I love getting into stuff like that, but that's not really the biggest value add for the client. Getting all the information digested and presented, you save hours of startup time. And I want to emphasize again another point Andrew made. When you can use, like, say, FP Alpha to get all this stuff organized and you present it to whoever the client's estate planning attorney is before the first meeting and you have a chat about it, you both all hit the ground running and do a better job for the client. And by not having to focus so much on the stuff we used to focus on, we can do a better job by focusing on what real value added means. I'll
yeah,
give you an example, Andrew. Years ago, I spoke at the Heckerling Institute on um, the future of the profession. And at the time, one of the things that I did is I had a client that had just come back that had been in my office 10 years earlier. And in the intervening 10 years, we adopted, because it got much more powerful and it's much better since then, document generation software. So most of the documents, certainly none of the trusts and complex wills, we don't draft taking a form out of our box. We draft using software on the cloud. And it gives us an incredible ability in terms of efficiency, in terms of flexibility to pick a myriad of different options that no firm can have 50 different trusts or 100 different trusts, but document generation software does. I had looked at the billing detail for that client from 10 years earlier when we did stuff manually and when they came back just before this institute a few years ago, some years ago. When we did the work before AI, this was long before AI, before document generation software, 70% of the time was, senior associate drafting, junior associate drafting, senior reviewing it, my reviewing what senior did, back to junior for senior to revise, blah, 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 blah. When I went and started adopting document generation software, we had 70% of the time was either writing memos, communications with client, meetings with clients, phone calls with client. Only 30% was drafting. It flipped it around completely. And that's exactly what's happening now with AI. Routine tasks, AI can make us more efficient or even do them for us. And we can focus on what's really important to the clients. And I think as financial advisors get involved in estate planning, there's some really vital areas. And I want to go through a few others and get your reaction. Understanding the client and communicating personal issues, paramount to me. That's number one because I may not know it. Boy, if I miss that a kid has an addiction issue and the parents were uncomfortable talking about it and you picked up on it, that's really important. And the second is getting all the data, synthesizing it. I mean, I struggle with clients to just find out who owns their assets. And I don't need to do that. You can do that. Another area that there's a huge opportunity is probate. Now, I'm using it generically because maybe they have a revocable trust, they avoid probate. But when somebody passes away, what can you do to proactively handle and help it? And I'm going to give you a really good example. And I'll even mention the firm's name because they did an amazing example. And I'm going to give you a really bad example, and I won't mention the name. So let's start with the bad example. We have, and this has been repeated multiple times, and I don't understand it, Andrew, major, well-known, brand name, big financial firms. Client goes there, they start retitling assets to pay on death, transfer on death, without understanding that there was an estate plan that was going to put those assets in trust so they're asset protected if the estate tax, the exemption gets lowered, which it may in the future. If they get sued, everything would have been handled by the trust and the plan. They completely dismantled the entire plan, emasculate it, by just willy-nilly changing asset title. The other thing, and this really is frustrating, and talk about an important role for wealth advisors. I'm making up the name, folks. I can't tell you how many times I get account statements from a financial advisor, and it says something like Smith Family Trust. Okay, the last time this happened, last week, we had husband's revocable trust, husband's insurance trust, wife's revocable trust, wife's insurance trust. I didn't create these. These documents were legacy from prior attorneys. And there was a family trust that husband got from his family. So they had five trusts, three irrevocable, two not. What is the Smith Family Trust? Which trust is it? And when you do something that unclear, everything gets done wrong. We had a situation where they had the wife's social security number on the revocable trust of the husband. So when he died, theoretically he had no assets. How do we get a basis step up? So I did some Harry Potter legal documentation, not for the video. And we tried to clean it up, and we had statements signed by everyone. We got it sorted out. What a mess. What a waste of time. Making sure that clients' account statements are clearly worded, even, and if you have to truncate it, because if it's John Smith's revocable trust, J Smith RV TR. I mean, I know you only got so many fields, but you got to do it in a way that's understandable. Nobody knows what's going on. You got to make sure you have the right tax ID number on an account. And you, as the wealth advisor, need to understand, and this segues into what I think is one of the very most important things to do, how their plan is being administered. You're more important than the lawyer to the plan administration. You want a huge value add? Help them keep their plan operating right. That's huge.
Yep.
How does this happen? How do firms not know what an account is? How do they put random names on things and the wrong ID numbers?
Well, they're not. It's not being coordinated with their estate plan. They never. If it's a transaction, it's more likely for things to fall through the cracks. If you understand the client's estate plan, then you can pick up on issues that are happening. If someone says, there's like a temptation for a client to say, "Oh, maybe I should transfer on death. Maybe I should hit this, put someone there," without the
Now I avoid
understanding.
probate, but you did anyhow because you got a revocable trust. Why aren't you using it?
Yeah, so but if that's what happens, if it's just a transaction, then easy to happen. That's kind of stuff is easy to happen. But if you, if as advisors get more involved in their estate plan and say, oh, no, this is how it was set up. It was set up because, you have a disclaimer trust and you want to preserve that exemption and don't override the thing, then it won't. Then they could say, "Don't override the thing," right? Or this isn't this isn't titled correctly. So I think that's the there are a lot of issues that happen. I think the advisors will, on the execution of the plan. I've heard as much as 30% of revocable trusts don't even get executed. They go to the lawyer, and the lawyer does his or her job, and it goes. Now it's time for the revocable trust to be set up. There's administrative work. Let's face it, it's going to take a little time. But how often? How probably 30% of the time. That's what I've heard. 30% from lawyers like you. 30% of the time, revocable trusts aren't even set up at the financial institutions and funded. So
It
the
defeats the whole point. And by the way, the reason it's not just a question of avoiding probate, because if you have a pour over will, it should go into the trust, but it's about protecting clients' assets when they get old from disability, cognitive issues. Having that fully funded revocable trust is really important. So, to me, one of the problems of why this occurs is while financial advisors as a group seem to want to be very anxious and should getting more active in estate planning, one of the keys is the basic boring paint drying, as exciting as paint drying, are the accounts titled right. If you're not sure what the plan is, you got to have a meeting with the estate planning attorney. If your client is worried about cost, you meet as the wealth advisor with the attorney without the client, because then we don't have to go through all the niceties. We can talk professionally, boom, 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 explain the plan, how the account should be. Once you have that knowledge, you'll know what to do. And I think that's, to me, and this is, I wasn't disagreeing with you with the value of having, say, FP Alpha summarize the document so that the financial advisor can explain to the client the big picture, because sometimes people forget, probably a lot of time. But don't overlook the basics. If all their account titles are wrong, it doesn't matter what's in the documents. You got
right,
to start with that. Let me give you the good example. That was a bad example. I had a client that passed away, very large estate. They consolidated all their assets with one particular trust company that did a phenomenal job. I got an email from their relationship manager at relationship person at the trust company, and she had a whole balance sheet put together of everything for the family and any trust they had by correctly by who owned what. She had a summary of all the beneficiary designations. They did an amazing job because over this maybe 10 years since I had met with the client, nothing had changed other than the financial advisor had and people tease advisors, wealth advisors, for harvesting or collecting assets. But by pulling all the assets into one institution, I had one person to talk to. They had full knowledge of every single account, how it was titled. They had every beneficiary designation. Everything was done right. We spent a couple of hours on the phone on a web meeting, walked through every single account, talked about how everything and where it had to be transferred. I went through the will and the rev trust and talked to the sequence of what had to be done. We created a letter while we were on the phone, AI generated, as to how those assets should be transferred, what document. We created a document to transfer them. We went through and discussed that now that the husband had died, what bucket should the wife access first, considering income tax, estate tax, because they were a large estate, and every other issue, and RMDs, because you can't miss those. And we had a whole checklist that we developed in the same 2 hour meeting of exactly what they had to do going forward. So administering the plan properly is a huge value add, understanding the personal elements, collecting all the data, but helping with the administration of the estate. Why should a law firm have paralegals? And now my colleagues are going to be unhappy with me. Try to transfer assets from here to there. It used to be a big part of the business. I haven't done that for years and years and years. We usually create a roadmap and let the accountant, financial advisor, and family handle a lot of the legwork. Why should they pay a lawyer to do it, or even a paralegal? But if you have your arms around the account and you understand the sequence, like I just went through, where we reviewed the documents with the financial advisor on a web meeting, and boom, 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 they executed almost everything.
yeah.
Literally in 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, much of the estate was already resolved. That's the gold standard you want to move towards.
I think that is the gold standard. The question I have, and I think where I would say AI comes in, is how do you? This is obviously a wealthy family that you're talking about, the trust company and significant assets. So how do you give that same level of service to someone who is not as wealthy? And that's where it's been more of a human problem before in the past, where you need to throw very knowledgeable and highly paid people at it and at the problem, and that's why it's been limited. Estate planning at this level with in the wealth advisory space has been limited to wealthier clients. But the average client, how do you give them that same level of service and intelligence? And for the wealth advisor, they have to use AI to streamline this thing, or it's going to remain in the same place. So let us extend this help to more people, which end up being more of the people that financial advisors work with, more of that.
Andrew, if you put a client's financial data, you import it into FP Alpha, and you have the document summarized, doesn't FP Alpha give you sort of a summary of flow chart of where the assets go on death?
Yeah,
So
yeah, with no additional time.
if you look at that and share that with the estate planner, you do a quick meeting, does that jive with what's in the plan? Like the bad example I just gave you, they set a POD and TOD in joint accounts that completely bypassed the whole trust plan that we had set up carefully and with thought for the client. And in fairness to everybody, the client changed wealth advisors, never told me, so I never had a conversation with the new wealth advisor. That's bad. You got to
Yep,
have a conversation with the attorney. And honestly, I really prefer having a conversation with the wealth advisor before we have a full meeting with the client. Much better for us to be on the same page and at least have a general idea where we're going before we get the client on and start tripping over each other.
yep,
Um, Andrew, one of the things, and this is, I think, an example of what FP Alpha can do. Um, I had a situation not so long ago where a client came to me and had a really large trust that they inherited from a family member. And that trust was like three, four times the client's net worth. So I said to the client and the advisor, we need to review the trust to see whether there are powers of appointment. And both the client and the advisor said, no, we don't want to pay you to do it. The trust is irrevocable. It can't be changed. Now, first of all, and then I'll tell you how FP Alpha solves this. First of all, the fact that a trust is irrevocable doesn't mean it can't be changed. There's lots of ways nowadays through decanting, which is pouring an old trust into a new trust, non-judicial modification, where under state law, all the parties can agree to a change. Trust protectors are common now. Sometimes other people have powers like limited powers of appointment. There's lots of ways you can modify a trust. But even apart from modifying it, let me explain what a power of appointment is in case somebody's not familiar. So in a typical estate plan, let's say in a revocable trust, on the first death, we may set up a marital trust for the spouse. And on the second death, it gets divided in a cleaver family situation to the three kids equally. But you give the surviving spouse what's called a limited power of appointment. So he or she can say, in their will, that marital trust on my death will be divided in the following way. I can appoint it amongst the kids into a new trust. That's really powerful. Why? What if one of the kids is, hit pay dirt on some kind of business venture and the other kid's struggling, or a kid develops an issue, or there's another family member you want to help, or the trusts aren't really as modern as they should be, so you can appoint to a modern trust. Using powers of appointment is a really common and very essential tool to building flexibility into an estate plan. I told this couple, if you have four times your wealth in this trust as you do in your own name, and you're getting income from it, so it's helping pay for your lifestyle. In this case, the wife was the beneficiary of this trust from her aunt. I said, if there's a power of appointment in that trust, you may want to appoint some of this trust into a new trust on your death, so your husband doesn't get cut out because he needs this money to live on, at least part of it. Or maybe you appoint 20% if you want some of it to stay in the family. They didn't understand what a power of appointment was. They didn't appreciate that even if it's irrevocable, it might be able to be changed within certain parameters. And they didn't appreciate the impact on the husband's lifestyle if the wife should die prematurely and then this trust gets cut off. But if you simply push the documents into FP Alpha and it gets you a summary, it Not 100% guaranteed if the language is funky, but often it's going to identify a power of appointment. That could, in this client's case, and this was an unusual case, but in this client's case, that could have been the single most important financial and estate planning decision for their financial security. That's the
Yeah.
power of what FP Alpha can do. You may not understand all the nuances or what could be done, but if you get from the software an indication that there's a power of appointment, ask the lawyer, bring it up to
Huge,
the client.
huge. I mean, you uncover an opportunity like that. I mean, that's a game changer for the relationship with a client. I mean,
Huge.
you've either solved a huge issue or prevented a big issue, and who else is going to do that? And these are the types of things that, can be served up on a silver platter with FP Alpha.
And you don't have to have all the answers. You don't. If you say, hey, client, you know, there's all this money in this trust. What happens on the first death? We got to look at the trust. We got to get a lawyer involved. It's important. And by the way, if the lawyer doesn't understand these nuances, you got to take them to a better lawyer. So it's really a huge opportunity. In this particular trust, by the way it played out, there were no powers of appointment. I wanted to encourage them to think about getting it decanted into a new trust. Their powers would be added. And the other thing I said, until if you don't have a power added, so you can't get anything to the husband and he's going to be in financial straits, why doesn't wife take a little bit more of a distribution each year and use it to buy life insurance and a trust to protect the husband? So there's a financial solution for the legal limitation, if you will. And I don't think the financial advisor was unhappy selling the insurance policy and having the husband realize that he saved his bacon. Um, Andrew, let me ask you a question. One of the issues, and it's come up with a couple of times, where we have clients that their financial advisors bring them to us. Our default plan, unless there's a real strong reason to do something different, is to have a um, long-term trust as long as state law allows. And we do that because we still have a 50% divorce rate. People get in trouble with the IRS. I've seen over the years of the decades of practice, more than a handful of people completely wiped out by tax liens. People get sued, not just doctors, but anybody. If you have assets in a trust, it works. And earlier we were kind of joking that, you mentioned something about distribution at age 30. And I said, yeah, that almost guarantees the kid gets divorced or sued at 31. Murphy's Law. Why take it out of a trust? I think what a lot of people don't understand, the child, if you really trust them, can be their own trustee. They just have to have a limitation. It's called health, education, maintenance, and support, HEMS, on how much they can distribute to themselves as beneficiary. Creditors can't get to it. They have pretty much unfettered control, very little restriction, and it's safe. I have found when I've had those conversations with some advisors, they get very resistant as if I'm trying to complicate the plan instead of appreciate the protection it affords. Thoughts, suggestion, comments?
I think that the client needs to hear all possibilities. Goes back to the human side of planning, right? You're talking to the client and you're saying, here are some things that could potentially happen in your life and, or your children's lives. So here are the things, this is to address it. Here are the pros. Here are the cons. This is what I've seen in my practice. And then they can make a decision. And I think that you're going to coach them in parts of the right answer. But the human side of things is going to come into play. And so you're going to, this is why a discussion needs to happen. I don't know why, uh, an advisor would want to interfere with an attorney who's saying, this is what I've seen. Here are the possibilities. You don't know how your kids are what's gonna happen in your kids' lives, and this is why you could consider a lifetime trust. And for that, why would an advisor say take the money out at 30? It doesn't make sense. You have to let the attorney coach the client. Sometimes the client will come back to the advisor and say, well, what do you think? What are your thoughts? And once maybe they're struggling and that's their personality. I want to hear from all sorts of people, but I let the attorney bring additional information to the client, and then the client decides. And I don't know why an advisor would want to exert strong opinions. It's why they have the attorney involved. An advisor doesn't want to be in that type of situation anyway. Why does the advisor want liability or to be going practicing in an area that they're not licensed to practice in or paid to practice in? Surface some things and let the attorney run with it.
Let me respond with a couple of quick comments. First of all, I think one of the biggest value adds you can have as an advisor, get any existing irrevocable trust that any client has, get a summary through FP Alpha, see when the trust ends. If you have a trust that ends at age 30, 35, any age like that, it's usually not optimal planning because you never know when there's a divorce, a lawsuit, a claim, and you have no idea what the future of the estate tax is going to be. And trusts properly done, yes, they have compressed income tax rates, properly handled, and you can probably fix this with powers of appointment. Trusts are actually a valuable income tax planning tool. But if you get a summary out of FP Alpha and it says the trust ends at an age, bam, that right there is a value add. Client, the trust ends at age 30 and all the kids get the money. What if they're not mature? What if they have a drug addiction? What if they get sued? What if they get divorced? You can decant or transfer that trust into a new trust that goes on longer. Why not do that? Let's talk to your estate planner. So that is a quick, easy, you can read the FP Alpha summary, see that there's an issue like that, get the client to an attorney. You're the hero. You identified the problem. And it's not that the prior attorney or the attorney years ago, if it's the same one, did it wrong. Practice was different 10 and 20 years ago. People didn't do long-term trust because the profession just didn't focus on the things I just said. So it's a quick, easy value add for you to do. Really is. You mentioned something about liability, and that concerns me too. I don't think financial advisors have to expose themselves to liability to be really actively involved in estate planning, organizing documents, helping on probate, making sure the plan's administered right, helping review documents and bringing up issues that get done. I think if you give specific advice that turns out to be wrong, you're creating an exposure. But that's not where you're getting the points with the client. It's by giving the ideas. It's by helping administer it. It's by making it easier, saving legal fees because you've done so much of the legwork. You don't need to get into some nuance of GST planning. And if you don't know what that is, don't do it. That doesn't have to be the focus. There's so much value you can add to the client. And if you use these AI tools, it can help you get ideas to bring up for conversations, even beyond your knowledge level. Just couch it as, hey, here's an idea. I'm not an estate planner, but let's talk about it. And maybe this is something, at the end, we'll give you a summary of what might be useful to talk about with your estate planner. And hey, I'll give you a summary to your estate planner and talk to them first to make it even more efficient. Great way to go.
Yeah, I
Andrew,
agree.
I've
And
seen,
that's perfect
I know
role.
I think we're almost out of time. One last question. I've seen some advisors get on like web meetings and have clients, I don't want to mention a name, get on some website that drafts legal documents and help talk them through drafting a legal document. What do you think about that?
I think that very rarely are legal document drafting solutions going to be the answer. I've never seen a client who's wanted a legal drafting solution. Hey, I need a legal drafting solution. Let's go back to the human side of planning. You came up with a story. You gave a story of an advisor sent me a client said that probate was the most important thing to address, and then you looked at the client situation and said asset protection is actually the biggest priority. And how we talked about how a human side of the business, both in terms of wealth management and estate planning, is the future. So why strip out the human side, which is going to, and the judgment side, which is going to uncover all sorts of, lead the conversation to different solutions. Most of the document drafting has been compressed in terms of importance, right? That's what you said, and I
Yeah,
agree.
planning is
The
far more important.
planning is much more important. The conversations, the human side of the business, and that's going to lead to different. different solutions. And why would you strip out the human side? It's not what clients of financial, especially clients of financial advisors who already value the human side of the business want. They want, there's no demand from clients to, why save a few dollars, a one-time expense that you're going to incur once in a blue moon. You're not going to get a better product. And you can afford it. The client can afford it. Instead of, you're going to get a potentially a worse product, and the client's going to miss opportunities. They have no idea what those opportunities are, because they're not experts here. To save a few dollars that they can afford, it makes no sense. It's not aligned with the audience, and it can seriously lead them to problems. It also creates a very awkward situation for the financial advisor, because this is if the advisor if the client wants the advisor to surface some issues, says, okay, you can consider, let's go back to the trust. Should you consider changing the trust from age 30 to a lifetime trust? Who is there to talk to? There's no one it's like the advisor surfaces it. There's no one to run with that idea. The client can't go to the online document solution and say, hello, what are the pros and cons of this? The client is doing their own plan. In other words, the client is self-planning. That's at the end of the day, the document solution is saying, you are doing your own plan, client, and there is no attorney involved to be able to bounce this off of. The chances of leading to a worse solution are greater, and the role of the advisor is completely stripped out. The advisor does not have anyone on the team to carry the ball forward. So the advisor can't function as a generalist, because then the client's going to come back to the advisor and say, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. The advisor's not in a position to do that. So the advisors completely reduce their role in the estate planning to close to nothing, which is a worse outcome for the value for the client, but also the importance of their relationship with the client in estate planning. So I don't like the document solution at all. I think it has minimal value.
I don't understand it, because you know what? If you, as the wealth advisor, are the catalyst for the plan, you organize the information, you interface with the client and explain what's going on, you help with plan administration, you help with probate administration when that happens. Why would you want the liability exposure for drafting what could be highly technical documents? And as we keep saying, the real threshold first step issue is, what is the plan? What does the client need? Anybody can go to an online source and get a pour of will and a revocable trust, but what do you need in the trust? So, for example, if I have a client that's getting on in years and has cognitive issues, I may not let them revoke their revocable trust unless an independent party, maybe their longtime family accountant, approves the revocation. You're not getting a mechanism like that online. You're not getting that kind of tailoring. It may only be a few lines in the document, but those few lines is what makes it really work for that client. Andrew, you want to say a sort of any summary comments, and then I'll make a 30-second summary and we'll wrap up.
My summary would be, going back to why I do this in the first place. The clients want help. The advisor wants to extend the services that they provide. And estate planning is an extremely personal business. It brings the advisor closer to the client. What we see financial advisors doing is using this to bring in more business, work with even wealthier clients, and they need the ability, a tool that will save them time if they're very experienced in this, or a tool that will help them and enable them to have conversations if they don't have the level of experience. And then there's this big problem of intergenerational wealth transfer that's coming, and without the relationship with the kids, the advisor is going to lose that business. So estate planning is huge, let alone the relationships for referrals. You could build a better relationship with one estate attorney. That could be a big change catalyst for your business. You get a $10 million referral, they come, you have the right relationship. You don't fight. You don't fight Marty with his planning, people seem to be fighting you for some reason. Mark, I wouldn't want to fight you. You don't have the personality of someone I would want to fight with and begin with. So
It's not me, but I think it's the point that you raised earlier. You have to know what level of expertise you have. And I think too many advisors get wedded to a plan that they think works, and that's not what their role as estate planning is about. There's so many vital things you can do. You can be the catalyst, you can be the idea person, you give the value add just by running it through FP Alpha and seeing some of the issues in the trust. There's so much you can do, and you have a long-term involvement in the estate plan if you do it right. It's not just about the documents, it's about we're going to get the account set up right, consistent with the plan. If a God forbid happens, we're going to administer the plan. We're here for you. You can have even the dominant role, but just be mindful of where you're doing that. There's so many value add places you can be in the estate planning realm. Why push it if you're arguing with somebody that has more knowledge? And to be fair, some attorneys don't, and you have to be actively involved so you can blow the whistle and say to the client on the side, this attorney doesn't have the knowledge for what you need.
no,
So your
sometimes you
role
need
is
to do that.
huge, but focus on what it is. And I think you need to be mindful of unlimited liability issues. Why take on liability by helping a client draft a document? If the client's going to go online and get a document, I don't think you want to be on a meeting doing that, because if something goes wrong, and with online documents, there's a decent chance it will, they're going to say, but my financial advisor helped me draft that. That's not where you want to be. And then you got an unauthorized practice of law issue. Why go there? It's not the most important, interesting, or appreciated component of the plan. And if you don't know
Great.
where to get started, I'm not plugging FPL because I ain't getting a commission. But if you put in a plan and data on a client and you just get back the summary reports that FP Alpha does, if you're not sure where to begin, just read it and sit down and talk to the client. It's going to be a great meeting, and I almost would guarantee you each time you'll find something. And it may be different for each client. And now you've set the client up that you have all the data to present to the estate planner and make that process less costly. I don't think any clients will complain if they have to pay less in legal fees. Andrew likes paying legal fees, but no one else I know does.
It's only because I get to spend more time with you, Marty.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hopefully, some of these discussions, which I think some were not easy, will be helpful.